Welcome back. My name's Nevakanezah, and today I'm going to be clicking notifications for a game I'm already in. No, I'm just kidding. Today we're going to be playing a cats game. Perhaps the faction that gives people the most trouble if they're first trying to learn the game, because they can be very easy to pick up, but very difficult to master, and are often very challenging to win with. If you've watched my cats guide already, then you know why I'm setting up in the top corner of the winter map. It's because I want to take over this top row of clearings which have all the double build slots in them. I do actually have the key advantage here of not having an opposing high-reach faction in the game, but it's not exactly mandatory, and while it is advantageous for me to have the extra space, it doesn't mean that my opponents are without options to stop me. Quite the opposite, in fact, because my opponent chooses to go with the Harrier Vagabond, who is very, very capable of killing everything I know and love. As far as setup goes here, I've put my workshop in mouse crafting to get the easiest use out of a single workshop. I've put my sawmill up north where it's out of the way, and I've put my recruiter near the middle where it's going to reinforce the choke points. I'm going to put that workshop to use right away to craft mouse partisans, but I am actually rather worried about the Harrier. They haven't set up in a typical location. This could imply that they're trying to go after my northern sawmill right away, which I choose to discourage by putting my recruiter here instead of far over on the left corner. I overwork and build my second sawmill in the bottom right where it's far out of the way of anyone, and well, this isn't the most optimal way to set up your first turn. It's better that I lose a bit of space now and avoid having to rebuild sawmills in the long term. Lastly, I have two bird cards that I don't intend to craft and an abiding fear of the Harrier Vagabond. It's possible that they're intending to destroy cardboard right off the bat, and I don't want to put myself in a position where that's going to be possible or even desirable for them. Rather than taking control of the choke, the Alliance sets themselves up in the top left corner, blocking access to my build slots, but being easier to handle overall. The Harrier is a different story. On their first ruin, they pull the second sword. If they so chose, they could now go to any clearing on this board and eliminate 5 things. If you happen to be an especially competitive player, this is the optimal path for the Harrier, and a big reason of why I'm very nervous right now. To my great relief, they choose to be peaceful. I won't be granting them the same courtesy. As part of chasing some easy victory points, the Otters actually choose to take out the most threatening of the sympathy tokens in the center of the board and make my life quite a bit easier. Behind the Harrier, the Otters are actually my other great threat on this board, between both their scoring and military capacities. I'll have to be cautious that they don't get overfed, but my other opponents are not factions that tend to spend a lot. Better still, if I find an opportunity to buy mercenaries in order to have the Otters fight someone else for me, I'm definitely going to be taking it. For my second turn, my path ahead is straightforward. Build my third recruiter in order to increase my card draw, recruit to build up my army, and kill the Harrier. The choice to damage their sword instead of a crossbow is the first clue that this Harrier might not actually have very violent intentions in this game. While I don't want to make any mistaken assumptions, it is important to know what kind of strategies your opponents are pursuing in order to understand where you can put your efforts. The Alliance revolts in the best clearing they have access to, but they now find themselves cornered between a militantly defensive Cats player and a point-hungry Otter player. They're able to train an officer, however, so they manage to make sure that their base is well defended on the first turn here. The Harrier chooses to continue opening the ruins, finding a boot, and being once bitten, twice shy, they choose to end their turn outside of my sphere of influence. They learn quickly. The Otters are content to remain on the far side of the board and farm points, choosing to draw many cards and recruiting once in order to battle my workshop. While I may never know what life would have been like if I had been able to craft this bag, I do know that both of my cards are mice, and I can use mouse partisans to get immediate revenge upon the Otters. With the Harrier expelled, the Otters complacent, and the Alliance stabilized, I have room to just continue my engine. We recruit to build up our army, move to retake space and distribute our forces, and build a sawmill somewhere we can defend. Here, the Woodland Alliance is actually playing a very unusual game. They don't have a whole lot of supporters ready, but they do have 3 officers at this point, and they've used it to recruit a staggering number of warriors on top of their base. It's pretty normal for the Alliance to spend these first few turns building up their resources in order to burst a little across the board, and this time around it seems they're interested in doing that via warriors instead of sympathy alone. The Harrier continues exploring ruins, and they find the hammer this time around, which is probably excellent for them because they need it in order to repair their items. While their choice to remain non-violent earlier in this game had implied that they might be a newer player, their decision to craft the crossbow here all but confirms it. By crafting the crossbow, the Harrier badly overloads their satchel, to the degree that they're now going to have to discard 2 items, something that a more experienced player would have done anything to avoid. Moreover, one of the items they discard is the sword, all but confirming that I no longer need to worry about the Harrier in this game. Good news for me, because up to this point I have actually put a fair bit of effort into worrying about them. We return to my turn, and the otters persist in having nothing I want to buy. Generously enough, they've taken out another sympathy token for me, which gives me ample opportunity on this turn to move some warriors around in order to finally set up martial law in the last of these top clearings. Of equal value is the fact that I now have a trade post on one of my more defended clearings, so in the event the otters leave themselves open to trade disruption, I have that option easily available. While it would be nice to rebuild my workshop and take advantage of the 4 points of crafting I currently have in my hand, it's far more beneficial for me to further reinforce my positions on the board, and there's no way in hell I'm crafting the tea. While I don't currently need it, it's probably wise to keep the mouse dominance in hand if ever I need to go for a more desperate play towards the middle or end of the game. Against these particular factions, they might have a harder time undoing it, and if I get outraced on points, I might need to use it later. The Woodland Alliance employs their ball of warriors in order to set up a defended sympathy token in the center of the board, but they also take the time to craft the hammer, which in any other game with the Harrier would be a death sentence to us all. If the Vagabond is inexperienced, as I have surmised, then this is not really a problem, but it does open the door for them to return to the game in a big way if they did employ it very aggressively. Accordingly, the Vagabond aids the Woodland Alliance for this hammer, and uses it and their previous hammer to craft the tea and repair their coins. With this turn, the Vagabond is back to a position of significant power, and if they ever end their turn on top of the otters, I'm going to take advantage of it. It's the otters' turn now, and suffice to say, at 5 points ahead of the rest of the table, they're actually becoming a problem. They've spent the entire game farming points off of trading posts and crafting, but while this generally would have been a slower strategy in games where they've gotten so few buys, they're keeping up by managing to take out a number of sympathy tokens. On this turn, they even managed to avoid trade disruption by fighting the sympathy token to the north after they've already committed their other funds. But, be still my beating heart, they've parked 4 of their warriors on top of the Vagabond. This sort of situation is by far the most effective way to police 2 different factions at once. For the investiture of 2 warriors, 1 action, and some cards for most partisans, I've managed to deal 3 hits to the Vagabond, consume an ambush from their hand, and deal 2 hits back to the otters. I don't have to move my own warriors, I don't have to have counter ambushes, it's pretty much pure profit. With my remaining action, I decided to replace that workshop I lost earlier because being able to place one for 2 points on the next turn is quite valuable. I even get lucky and I draw another tea. While I abhor the idea of crafting the first tea for the Vagabond, having the second one doesn't necessarily have quite the same impact as the first, and I'm less worried, especially now that the Vagabond has proven to be inexperienced. Much to my surprise, the Alliance does not actually revolt in that rabbit clearing. I don't know whether they lacked the cards, or whether they never intended to revolt there in the first place, but it seems that their strategy is to continue spreading sympathy using their warriors, and just continue rolling with 1 base. Maybe a little less aggressive than my expectations, but they've managed to catch up to the rest of the table, so I guess I can't complain. On their turn, the Vagabond chooses to go and explore the last of the ruins for their bag, which I probably would not have advised. Currently, they've damaged both of their hammers as well as their crossbow, leaving only their torch, sword, and second crossbow to work with, and at this point, the tempo loss from trying to continue rather than going straight into the forest is severe enough that I wouldn't recommend it. They aid the Woodland Alliance twice to increase their reputation with them, and now that the Vagabond has hit 10 points, it seems likely that a coalition will be coming in the future. It seems the poor otters were not so fond of my mercenaries' plan, and after consolidating their warriors, they come after me in force. That's quite alright, I account for these things. What neither of us accounted for, however, was that the otters are going to have terrible rolls on this turn, and fail to actually overtake any of the buildings that are in this clearing. Not only am I lacking a fox card to recover those cats with field hospitals, but the otters also have the fox ambush, so I'm not really in a position to clear them out of this space. It's better, then, for me to spend the 3 warriors that they're currently demanding in order to buy the fox ambush from them, move some of the warriors I currently have back into that space, and just dare the otters to do anything about it. Rather than recruiting to defend that space, I'm going to move some warriors from a distant clearing instead. Reason being that I'm placing the last of my sawmills this turn for 5 points, and if the otters do end up taking out that clearing, I'll have space to just replace it again for another 5 points. What I want, however, is for it to be expensive for the otters to do anything of the sort. Between crafting the tea, a sawmill, and a sympathy token, I gain 8 points this turn, putting me at 21, well ahead of the otters and now the biggest threat at this table. With all of my sawmills on the board, and potentially 8 wood to work with, it's time to start looking at how I might be able to win on the next turn. Based on my own estimates, I'm going to win unless the table can remove many sawmills on this turn, and prevent me from reaching any sympathy tokens. During this time, the Alliance player makes another play to spread across the board, and they do a very admirable job of catching up in points. The odds are pretty good at this point that if I'm not able to win on my turn, the Alliance will win on theirs. Much to their credit, the Vagabond realizes the threat I currently pose to the table and helps the otters in taking out that clearing of mine. This is beneficial for them both because the otters are not really in a position to win on their turn unless something truly drastic happens. And to the Otter players' credit, they realize the threat that the Alliance currently poses to the table, as well as the potential point gains. After taking out my clearing, they end up going up north and using their Fox Partisans to delete the Woodland Alliance base, a choice that almost certainly prevents the Woodland Alliance from winning on their turn. Sadly, despite the valiant efforts of both of these players, I am in a very solid position to win on my turn, and the fact that I've drawn 2 bird cards makes it even easier. After taking a few moments to ensure I take this turn without making any mistakes, I'm able to build 3 times for the 9 points I need, taking a little bit of flair by using the Otter riverboats to help achieve this. No risky battles, no wasted effort, just a clean final turn. And that's a cat's win. Thank you all very much for watching. Remember to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more in-depth videos about one specific board game, and be good to each other.